Welcome to Whispers of the Night, where stories unfold softly, like a candle flickering before sleep. Tonight, I invite you to slow down, to breathe deeply, and let the world outside grow quiet for a while. Here, we wander through tales that shimmer with warmth, with nostalgia, and just a touch of magic. Each whisper is meant to rest your thoughts, calm your heart, and guide you gently toward dreams. Before we begin, make yourself comfortable. Perhaps curl beneath a blanket, dim the lights, and let your breathing find its rhythm. As the night settles, allow your eyes to grow heavy, and your imagination to awaken in its place. And if these stories bring you peace, remember to subscribe to Whispers of the Night, so that every evening when the stars begin to glow, another soft story will wait here for you. Now let's drift into the quiet world of the Silver Pendant, a story of memory, emotion, and the soft glow of magic that lingers between dreams. You are here now, in the quiet between heartbeats. The night has grown soft around you, and everything feels slower, lighter, like drifting through a dream. Imagine the gentle glow of a candle, flickering across a small wooden desk, the scent of old paper, the whisper of fabric brushing softly as you breathe. Outside, the moon drapes silver light across rooftops, and a faint wind stirs the curtains. Clara sits at her desk, the silver pendant in her hands. It feels warm, almost alive. She closes her eyes, and in the darkness behind them, memories shimmer like constellations. A grandmother's laughter, the sound of rain against glass, the feeling of being safe and loved. The pendant hums softly, its magic woven from honesty and compassion, and as its light glows brighter, it begins to untangle the knots of her heart, turning old fears into peace and old shadows into light. You can feel it, two-thought warmth that spreads slowly through your chest, calm, steady, and kind. Each breath is softer than the last. Each thought drifts farther away. You are surrounded by comfort, wrapped in quiet silver light. Let yourself rest here for a while. There's nothing you need to do, nothing to fix, nothing to prove, only the steady rhythm of your breath, the heartbeat of a story gently finding its end. The pendant's light fades slowly, but its warmth remains a reminder that even in silence, you are held by something gentle. Let the world blur now. Let sleep find you softly. Like moonlight over calm water, the night is peaceful. The story continues in your dreams. The Silver Pendant. The inherited secret. The morning after the funeral dawned pale and weightless, the kind of quiet that feels like it has been waiting for you. The world seemed muffled, as though the air itself had been wrapped in a soft shawl. Clara Vale stood by her window, still in the clothes she had worn the night before, gentle, off-white sweater tucked into a long, deep, burgundy skirt that brushed the tops of her white sneakers. Her straight black hair, a little longer than her shoulders, fell loosely against her back, and her eyes clear, gray-green reflected. The early light that trembled through the curtains. On the table before her rested the small wooden box her grandmother had left for her. It was nothing ornate, plain oak, polished smooth by decades of careful hands, but the brass clasp shone like something that refused to age. Clara traced the lid with her fingers. The apartment around her was still half asleep, an unwashed cup by the sink, a half-finished sketch of a sculpture in the corner, a small fern bowing toward the sun. The air smelled faintly of coffee and the rain that had passed during the night. When she finally opened the box, it made no sound, just a sigh of dust and old lavender. Inside, wrapped in a square of faded linen, was the pendant. She had expected a ring or perhaps a letter, but not this. The silver glimmered softly, worn smooth on the edges, engraved with swirling patterns that caught the light like waves frozen in metal. As she lifted it, a faint warmth pulsed through her fingers, so subtle she almost thought she imagined it. Her grandmother had worn this every day, though Clara had never been allowed to touch it. "It's not ready for you yet," she used to say with a teasing smile, and then tuck it beneath her collar. Now it lay in Clara's palm, its weight both comforting and heavy with meaning she couldn't name. She sat down at her desk, the wooden chair creaking beneath her. Outside, the street was waking footsteps on cobblestones. A bicycle bell, the distant murmur of a vendor opening his stall. The ordinary world, steady as ever. But here, in this small pocket of light and dust, something felt shifted. She turned the pendant over again and again, studying its engraving. It wasn't a pattern she recognized, neither floral nor geometric, but a flowing shape that seemed alive, as if part of it were always changing when she wasn't looking directly at it. The clasp was delicate and older than anything she owned, with a hinge that whispered when she opened it. Inside lay a tiny oval of glass, perhaps once holding a portrait, but now empty. Her thumb brushed the inner rim, and she felt the warmth again, this time stronger. A gentle hum, soft as the sound of distant bees, vibrated through the metal. Startled, she placed it on the table. The glow dimmed, then faded, leaving only the silver's natural gleam. Clara pressed her lips together and laughed quietly to herself. "You're tired," she murmured. "You're imagining things." Yet, when she picked it up again, the metal felt alive. She remembered her grandmother's stories, told beside the fire, about old objects that carried memories, about emotions stitched into fabric and carved into stone. As a child, she had believed them completely. As an art history student now, she explained them as metaphors, beautiful, symbolic, and entirely human. But sitting here, alone with the pendant warm against her palm, the distance between metaphor and magic felt smaller than she'd ever dared to think. By afternoon, the rain returned, painting soft streaks down the window. Clara brewed tea, the scent of chamomile drifting through the room. She set the pendant on a cloth beside her notebook and began sketching it. Line by line, she followed its pattern, tracing the engraved swirls with a pencil. Somewhere between one breath and the next, she realized she had drawn a shape within the shape, a faint outline hidden in the design. It looked like a keyhole, She leaned closer, heart quickening. Could it be an illusion from the metal's reflection, or something meant to be seen only from a certain angle? She tilted the pendant toward the light. As the silver caught the lamplight, she saw it clearly this time, a narrow slit, perfectly shaped, right beneath the engraving's curve. Her fingers searched it, but it felt smooth, seamless. Still, when she pressed lightly against the point where the lines met, something shifted with a soft click. The back panel moved barely, just a fraction. Clara gasped. The pendant had a hidden compartment. Her hands trembled as she eased it open. Inside, folded so small it seemed impossible, was a piece of yellowed paper. She drew it out carefully with tweezers from her drawer. It was fragile, edges worn to lace. When she unfolded it, the ink shimmered faintly under the lamplight. A tiny map, drawn in meticulous hand, showing a few lines of winding paths and one small mark in red. No words, no compass, only symbols she didn't recognize. Dot at the bottom corner. A signature her grandmother's. Clara sat back, stunned. The pendant's warmth returned, stronger now, pulsing softly in her palm as if responding to her discovery. A rush of emotion flooded through her grief, curiosity, wonder, and something like fear, all blending into one trembling breath. "What were you keeping, Grandma?" she whispered. "And why me?" The question hung in the air, unanswered, until the ticking clock filled the silence again. She folded the map and placed it back carefully. For the rest of the evening, she couldn't focus on anything else. Her books lay open, her tea grew cold, and the rain whispered against the glass like distant voices. By nightfall, she had set the pendant beside her bed, its chain coiled neatly like a silver thread. The room was dim, lit only by the amber glow of a single lamp. She lay down and closed her eyes, but sleep came slowly. Every time she drifted near, she felt the faint warmth of the pendant against her skin and saw flashes behind her eyelid, shapes of doorways, corridors bathed in blue light, a hand reaching toward hers. Then came the whispers, soft, like breath on the edge of hearing. They weren't frightening, only sad, full of yearning. She could almost make out words. Remember. The air around her seemed to pulse gently with each sound. Clara stirred, caught between dreaming and waking. In her half-sleep, she saw her grandmother standing in a room she didn't recognize. Stone walls, books stacked high, candles floating midair. The pendant glowed at her throat, and she smiled the way she always had before telling a secret. "Follow the map, my dear," she said. "It begins where the whispers end." Clara's breath caught. She reached forward, but the image dissolved into light. She woke to silence and the faint hum of the city outside. Morning had barely touched the sky, and the pendant lay cool against her collarbone, as if nothing had happened. But when she looked closer, she noticed something she hadn't seen before. Faint shimmer within the engraving, like fine dust caught beneath glass. She traced it gently, and warmth answered her touch. The same warmth she had felt the day before, only now it carried something else, a quiet pulse, steady and alive. For a long moment she sat there, wrapped in the hush of early light, the world outside just beginning to stir. Her grief felt lighter now, softened by wonder. The pendant, her grandmother's gift, no longer seemed like a keepsake from the past, but a thread pulling her toward something waiting ahead. Clara tucked the pendant beneath her sweater and rose from the bed. She placed her hand over it, feeling its steady warmth against her heart. "I'll find it," she whispered. "Whatever you wanted me to see." The promise lingered in the still air. Outside, the rain had stopped, leaving the streets glistening and new. When she stepped to the window, a shaft of light broke through the clouds, striking the pendant through the thin fabric and sending a soft reflection across the wall. It looked almost like a doorway of light, brief, trembling, and then gone. Clara smiled faintly, the first real smile since the funeral. The world beyond her window no longer seemed so gray. It waited quietly, patiently, for her to begin. And somewhere deep within the silver curves of the pendant, the engraving shimmered again, alive with faint light, as though listening. Whispers of the past. The following morning unfolded in muted shades of gray and gold. The rain had washed the city clean overnight, and the rooftops still shone with beads of water that caught the early sun. Clara Vale sat at her small desk, the silver pendant glinting faintly beside her cup of cooling coffee. The faint hum it had once given seemed to sleep again, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that it was listening. She had dreamed again this time of a library, endless shelves, floating dust like golden snow, and her grandmother's voice echoing from somewhere unseen. "Find the beginning," it had whispered. The words lingered even after she woke, slipping between her thoughts like music she couldn't stop hearing. Clara tied her black hair into a loose braid and slipped into her deep burgundy skirt, the soft wool brushing her knees as she moved. She chose her cream cardigan and slung her worn satchel across her shoulder, tucking the pendant carefully inside. Today, she would start with the university archive's old town records, photographs, maybe even her grandmother's name buried somewhere in an old newsletter. The campus library was quiet, heavy with the scent of dust and pages that had forgotten sunlight. Light filtered through tall windows in pale columns, catching in the motes that drifted through the air. The librarian, Mrs. Edivane, greeted her with a polite nod before disappearing into the maze of shelves. Clara found the section marked Local History 1920-1980 and began pulling down volumes whose bindings looked ready to crumble. Hours passed in silence, broken only by the turning of pages and the distant click of a clock. She traced her grandmother's name, Margaret Vale, through handwritten registers and old club rosters. There were mentions of her as a volunteer, a teacher, an organizer of art exhibitions. But one reference caught her breath: the Society of the Veiled Star, founding member, Margaret Vale. The Society of the Veiled Star. The entry was small, a single line in faded ink within a ledger of local cultural groups. No explanation, no address, nothing more. She copied it into her notebook, heart quickening. When she rose to stretch, she noticed something odd. The pendant lying on the table beside her notes was faintly warm again. A sliver of light slid across its surface, even though the window was shaded. The air around it seemed to ripple softly, like heat above pavement. She reached out, hesitant, and the warmth pulsed once gentle, like a heartbeat. Then the light vanished. Clara exhaled slowly, "You just want attention, don't you?" she whispered to the pendant, half smiling despite herself. Still, when she left the library, she couldn't help feeling that the pendant was watching her that evening. She returned to her apartment with the sky bruised violet behind her. The rain had begun again, fine and steady. She made tea and spread her notes across the small dining table, studying the words "veiled star" until they blurred. A secret society was it myth, some academic circle, or something older? Her grandmother had always believed in keeping beauty, safe paintings, relics, anything that told a story of wonder. But what if she had meant more than art? The pendant lay in the middle of the table, chain coiled like a silver serpent. Clara turned off the overhead light and watched how the lamplight glowed within its engraving. As the shadows deepened, a curious thing happened. The light from the pendant brightened slightly, enough to outline the curves of its design. She blinked, leaning closer. The warmth touched her fingertips again, then, just for a heartbeat, she thought she saw a reflection move inside the metal, a faint ripple, as if something within was shifting. Her breath hitched. "Okay," she murmured, "that's new." A sudden thump broke the silence. Her sketchbook had slid off the edge of the table on its own. Clara froze, eyes darting to the pendant. It lay perfectly still, its glow fading to ordinary silver. Her rational mind fought for balance. Perhaps she'd nudged the table, perhaps vibrations from outside. But deep inside, another part of her whispered that this was the same strange current she had felt in her dreams. The whisper of something unseen, stirring just beyond reach. Clara picked up the sketchbook and tucked it away, then reached for her phone. She typed the words "Veiled Star Society" into the search bar. Nothing, no records, no mentions, only an obscure reference to a defunct gallery from the 1940s. She leaned back, sighing. Her reflection in the dark window stared back at her, the pendant glinting faintly at her throat. "What were you part of, Grandma?" she said softly. The only reply was the quiet hum of the rain. The next morning, she decided to visit her grandmother's old house, a small brick cottage on the edge of town that had been locked since the funeral. She still had the key. The place had always smelled faintly of rosemary and parchment, a scent that seemed to follow Clara even now. When she pushed the door open, dust motes danced through the slanting light. Everything remained as it had been. The porcelain figurines on the shelf, the faded armchair, the framed photographs on the mantelpiece. She walked slowly through each room, touching objects that carried echoes of laughter and warm afternoons. In the study, a heavy oak desk stood by the window. Inside one drawer, she found a stack of letters tied with a blue ribbon. They were addressed to M. Vale, custodian, the Society of the Veiled Star. Clara's heart pounded. Custodian. The letters were written in an elegant, looping script, but time had blurred much of the ink. Still, a few words were clear enough to read. The artifacts must remain hidden until the world is ready again. The pendant will lead the chosen one to the first chamber. Beware the ones who seek to unbind the silence. Her fingers trembled as she set the papers down. The pendant against her skin grew warmer, almost hot. It felt alive, as though the letters had stirred something within it. A soft creak came from the hallway. Clara froze, listening. The wind, perhaps, but the air felt heavy now, charged. She turned toward the door, heart quickening, yet nothing appeared. Only the faint flutter of a curtain. She was sure had been still before. Something fluttered to the floor from the bookshelf, a slip of paper, yellowed and brittle. She bent to pick it up. In careful ink, it read, "Some secrets should remain buried." Her breath caught. The handwriting wasn't her grandmother's. It was sharper, hurried, and on the back, a single marca star enclosed by a veil-like circle, the same symbol etched faintly into the pendant's curve. Clara backed toward the desk, the pendant burning softly now, a pulse she could feel in her chest. Her mind spun between fear and fascination. Was someone warning her? Watching her? She stood in the quiet house, rain tapping against the windows, surrounded by the ghosts of her grandmother's life. Yet, she felt no malice in the errantly urgency. As if the house itself wanted her to understand, Clara drew a deep breath and steadied herself. "If you wanted me to stop, you shouldn't have left me the key," she said aloud, voice trembling but resolute. The pendant's warmth eased, settling into a steady thrum, almost approving. That night, back in her apartment, she laid the letters and the warning note on her desk. The shadows shifted across the room as the evening deepened. She could almost hear the soft whispering again, faint but present echoes of her grandmother's voice tangled with others, older and less distinct. Her gaze fell on the tiny map she had found in the pendant. She unfolded it once more, tracing the red mark. Now she noticed something she hadn't before. Faint ink patterns surrounding it, like constellations. And at the very edge of the parchment, a small symbol that matched the one on the warning note, the same star within a veil when she touched it. The pendant flared with light, soft, silvery, and pure. The glow spread across the desk, touching the letters, the map, the warning note, as if connecting them. Then it faded again, leaving only silence and the faint scent of ozone. Clara sat motionless for a long while, the ticking of the clock loud in her ears. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something else, a strange calm, like standing at the edge of a great discovery. Her grandmother's pendant was no ordinary heirloom. It was a key one that had begun to turn. And though the note had warned her to leave the secret buried, Clara knew she couldn't. The whispers had become part of her now, threading through her thoughts like light through fabric. She closed her notebook, extinguished the lamp, and sat in the dark, fingers resting on the warm silver against her chest. "Tomorrow," she whispered, "I'll find out where this leads." Outside, the rain slowed to a hush. Somewhere far away, a bell tolled once, and the city held its breath as if listening with her. The hidden room. The map had been waiting for her. It lay across the kitchen table, its edges softly curling, the inked constellations glimmering faintly in the lamplight. Clara traced her fingertip over the faded red mark she'd studied so many times, a spot on the outskirts of town where the forest pressed close against the hills. The pendant pulsed gently, its light echoing the tiny star on the page, as if in agreement outside. Dawn mist rolled down the streets, weaving through the trees like low clouds. She packed lightly a notebook, flashlight, thermos, and the pendant resting warm against her skin. There was something inevitable about it now, as though each step she took was one her grandmother had already chosen. By mid-morning, she reached the edge of the woods. The air was cold and sweet with pine. A narrow road wound between the trees, leading to a rusted gate nearly swallowed by ivy. Beyond it stood an old estate 3 stories high, windows shuttered, roof half collapsed. Its once white walls were now streaked with green and gray. But even from a distance, Clara felt the echo of something noble, something that had once been beautiful. She slipped through the gate, her sneakers crunching softly on the gravel. The pendant grew warmer the closer she came, its faint glow visible even in daylight. She followed the path to the front doors, which were carved with swirling patterns, almost identical to the engraving on the pendant's back. Her pulse quickened. "So this is where you wanted me," she murmured. The doors yielded with a low groan. Inside, dust hung like fog, stirred only by the thin light that filtered through cracked stained glass. The air smelled of paper and time. Clara moved slowly, each step echoing through the vast hollow hall. Portraits lined the walls, men and women in formal attire, all bearing the same calm expression, their painted eyes catching the light strangely as she passed. In the main corridor, she saw symbols carved into the paneling. Some were faint stars, others interlocking circles. One mark matched exactly the one she had seen on the warning note. Her fingers brushed over it, and for a heartbeat, the carving seemed to hum under her touch. The pendant responded with a soft vibration. She followed the pulse through the hall, up a grand staircase, and into a smaller room lined with empty shelves. At its far end stood an ornate mirror cracked across the center. She stepped closer, and the pendant's glow flared, reflecting silver across the broken glass. Beneath the mirror's frame, something caught her eye. A small square outline on the floorboards, almost invisible beneath years of dust. She crouched and pressed her fingers along the edges. The outline shifted. A hollow click sounded beneath her palm. Then, with a faint creak, a portion of the floor lifted, revealing a narrow passage descending into darkness. Her breath trembled, half fear, half awe. "Of course, there's a hidden room," she whispered. "Grandma, what did you get yourself into?" She switched on her flashlight and descended carefully. The air grew cooler, tinged with earth and metal. The staircase opened into a small chamber braced with stone walls. Bookshelves lined the space, filled with weathered journals. Tables were crowded with glass cases, fragments of metal, and half-collapsed boxes. In the center of it all stood a chest bound in tarnished brass, its lock intricate and strange-formed like interlocking petals. Clara stepped closer, the beam of her flashlight glancing off the chest's surface. Her heart thudded steadily. She reached for the pendant without thinking. It glowed brighter, almost expectant. "You shouldn't touch that." The voice came from the shadows. Clara froze, flashlight swinging toward the sound. A figure stepped into view, a young man, perhaps a few years older than her, with dark hair and a threadbare coat dusted with cobwebs. His eyes caught the light like polished amber. "I'm not here to harm you," he said quickly, raising a hand. "You must be Clara Vale." Her fingers tightened on the flashlight. "Who are you, and how do you know my name?" He smiled faintly. "Elias, I knew your grandmother a long time ago." Clara's chest tightened. "That's not possible. She passed away last winter." "Yes, he said quietly, stepping closer. But before she did, she told me someone would come looking for this place. Someone carrying the pendant. His gaze dropped to the silver chain around her neck. I suppose that's you. Clara hesitated. He didn't look dangerous. His expression was calm, eyes gentle, voice steady. Yet something about him carried the same quiet mystery that seemed to hum through the room. If you knew her, she said slowly, then you'll tell me what all this is. Elias's gaze drifted to the chest. It's what your grandmother protected. What all of us in the Veiled Star swore to keep hidden. He walked around the table, his fingers brushing the dusty journals. This room, it's a record of everything your family guarded. Objects that hold memory, emotion, pieces of the world's forgotten magic. Clara echoed, a disbelieving laugh catching in her throat. He turned to her fully. You've felt it, haven't you? The pendant's warmth, the whispers, the dreams, her breath. How do you know about those? Because it's what it does, Elias said softly. It reveals what's hidden, not just in places, but in people. It responds to what's inside you, to truth. Clara's hand rose unconsciously to the pendant. It pulsed gently under her touch. It reacted when I found old letters, she admitted. When I touched symbols, it glowed. That's because it recognizes emotion, honesty, the strength to face what's buried. He paused. Your grandmother was the last custodian of the first chamber. She used the pendant to protect the memories sealed here. Clara took a slow step. What's inside that? Elias's expression darkened slightly. Something unfinished, something she couldn't destroy. The air grew still. Dust floated in the flashlight beam like tiny stars. Clara knelt before the chest, heart racing. The lock looked impossible, petals folded upon petals. No visible keyhole. The pendant warmed again, almost urging her forward. She hesitated. If I open it, you might not be able to close it again, Elias said quietly. Clara looked at him, searching his face for a sign of deception, but found only calm resignation. Then she pressed the pendant gently to the center of the lock. A chime, soft and crystalline, filled the air. The metal petals began to shift on their own, unfolding like a blooming flower. Pale light spilled from within, washing the room in silver. The glow reached the shelves, the journals, the walls. Every surface reflected it until the whole chamber shimmered as if underwater. Clara shielded her eyes. What's happening? The pendant's truth, Elias said, his voice quiet but firm. It's showing you what it remembers. For an instant, Clara saw flashes in the light, her grandmother's hands resting on the same chest. A circle of people standing around her, their faces serene. A night filled with stars, burning low and close. The images flickered, soft as candlelight, then faded. The glow from the chest dimmed, leaving only a faint outline of brightness along its rim. The lock had fallen away completely. Clara reached forward, trembling, and lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of objects, an old journal bound in cracked leather, a handful of small glass vials filled with shimmering dust, and at the very center, something wrapped in faded silk. The pendant on her neck thrummed so intensely it almost hurt. She unwrapped the silk carefully. Within it lay a sphere of crystal, smooth and faintly glowing from within. Light swirled through it like smoke, ever-changing, alive. Clara felt warmth spread through her chest. She didn't understand what it was, but she knew somehow that it had been waiting for her. Elias stepped closer, voice barely above a whisper. That's the heart of echoes. Your grandmother said it responds to those who seek truth with compassion. It's alive in its own way. Clara stared, breath caught between awe and disbelief. The light reflected in her eyes like tiny constellations. It's beautiful, she murmured. A low sound shuddered through the room, the faint creak of old wood, a whisper of wind from nowhere. The pendant's glow flared once, then steadied. Elias tensed. It's never done that before. The chest began to vibrate faintly. Dust rained from the ceiling. Clara clutched the sphere instinctively, feeling its warmth pulse with her heartbeat. Then, without her touching it, the chest lid closed on its own. A soft click echoed through the chamber. The light from the pendant and the crystal merged into one slow, rhythmic, glow-steady breathing. Elias met her eyes. It's awake now. Clara looked down at the pendant, its light twining with the crystal's soft shimmer. For the first time, she didn't feel like an intruder in her grandmother's secrets. She felt like she had stepped into her place, outside, far above the hidden room. The forest stirred in the rising wind. The estate creaked as if exhaling after long silence. And beneath it all, in the hush between heartbeats, the faint whisper of the past began to speak again. The pendant's power. Morning light streamed through Clara's apartment, pale and slow, as if it, too, had just woken. The pendant rested on the windowsill beside a small vase of daisies, its silver edges catching the sun. Since returning from the abandoned estate, Clara had barely slept. Her thoughts kept circling the chest, the glowing crystal. Elias's words, it's awake now. She had brought the journal home to... Its pages were fragile, written in her grandmother's looping hand. The ink faded to a soft brown. When she opened it, a faint scent of lavender and paper rose like breath from another time. The first pages were simple notes, dates, sketches, fragments of observation. But as she read further, the writing became personal. The pendant reacts to the heart, not the mind. Only when I am calm, truthful, and open does it reveal the echoes fully. Fear dims it. Deceit silences it. Clara traced the words with her fingertip. Reacts to the heart. She lifted the pendant from the sill. It felt cool now, quiet. She slipped the chain over her head, letting it rest against her skin. Show me, she whispered. Help me understand. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the metal warmed. A thin silver line traced itself through the air before her eyes, soft and transparent, like light reflecting through mist. Shapes began to form, faint outlines of her grandmother's old shop, the shelves of fabric and jars of buttons. Then her grandmother herself appeared, smiling gently, arranging ribbons by color. Clara gasped. The air shimmered, soundless, and the image dissolved. The warmth faded. She stood trembling, her heart racing. It had shown her a memory. The pendant hadn't just revealed what was. It had reached backward, replaying the remnants of emotion tied to a place. She tried again, closing her eyes this time. The warmth returned, steadier now, spreading across her chest like a heartbeat shared. She saw flashes, her grandmother's hand resting on a wooden table, her laughter mingling with another woman's voice. Then darkness and the whisper of rain. When she opened her eyes, her cheeks were wet. "You kept so much," she murmured. For the next few days, Clara hardly left her apartment. She filled pages with sketches and notes, the pendant's reactions to touch, to music, to mood. When she painted soft strokes of watercolor, it glowed faintly. When she read aloud from her grandmother's letters, it pulsed in rhythm with her words. Elias visited once, bringing tea and quiet company. He stood by the window while she explained what she had seen. "You're doing what she did," he said softly, "listening to the past until it trusts you." But with each experiment, the pendant's power deepened and something darker began to follow. It started small, a reflection that lingered too long in the window, footsteps behind her when the street was empty. Once, late at night, she thought she saw a silhouette standing across the road, motionless beneath a lamppost. When she looked again, it was gone. Clara tried to dismiss it as imagination, but the pendant grew restless, its glow flickering like a warning. She began to lock her doors, draw her curtains earlier, and keep a small lamp burning through the night. One evening, as she sat reading the journal, the pendant pulsed sharply, not warm this time, but cold, as if touched by shadow. She looked up. The light in her apartment flickered once and steadied. Silence pressed close, heavy and breathless. Then came a sound, the faintest creak from the hallway outside. She stood, heartbeat hammering. "Elias," she called softly. No answer. The floorboards groaned again, closer. She moved toward the door, clutching the pendant. The chain shimmered under her grip, its glow faint but steady now, like a shield. She opened the door slowly. The hallway was empty. Only the distant hum of the city below. But at her feet lay a slip of paper, folded neatly in half. She bent to pick it up. On the front was her name in ink she didn't recognize. Inside, a single line. "The light you carry was never meant for one heart alone." Her stomach twisted. The handwriting was elegant, deliberate. She shut the door quickly and leaned against it, the note trembling in her hand. That night, she couldn't sleep. She sat on the floor beside her bed, the pendant clutched close, whispering questions into the dark. "Who are you?" she asked the shadows. "What do you want from me?" The pendant glowed faintly in response, but no voice came, only warmth, steady and compassionate, as if telling her she was not alone. In the days that followed, the tension grew. She began to sense emotions through the pendant, small flickers of other people's truths. When she brushed against a stranger on the tram, she felt a wave of sorrow that wasn't hers. When she shook Ilias's hand, she sensed quiet guilt, old and unresolved. It frightened her. The pendant was not just showing her memories, it was connecting her to others, their hidden fears, their fragile hopes. She started to avoid crowds, afraid of losing herself in the storm of other hearts. Yet part of her was fascinated. Each pulse of the pendant was a new window, a glimpse into how the world truly felt beneath the calm masks people wore. Late one afternoon, she stood before the mirror, pendant glowing softly. "Show me," she whispered, "what I need to see." The reflection shifted. For an instant, she saw herself as a child, sitting at her grandmother's table, learning to sew, smiling through tears because her first stitch had gone crooked. Her grandmother's hand rested on her shoulder, steady and kind. "It's not about perfection, my love," she had said. "It's about care." The image faded, leaving only her reflection. Clara touched the glass gently. In that moment, she understood. The pendant responded most strongly when her heart was open, not when she sought knowledge, but when she sought truth. That night, Elias returned. His face was pale, eyes shadowed with worry. "Someone's looking for you," he said. "They know about the pendant." "Who?" He hesitated. "A collector of relics. They've been searching for the veiled star for years. Your grandmother hid from them, and now they think you have what they want." Clara's throat tightened. "The artifact, the crystal in the chest." He nodded. "They believe the pendant is the key to unlocking its full power." She sat down, the pendant heavy against her chest. "Then what happens if they take it?" "Then its light could be corrupted," he said quietly. "The pendant magnifies emotion, love, grief, truth. In the wrong hands, it would twist those feelings into something darker." Clara closed her eyes, the warmth of the pendant pulsing through her fingers. She had never wanted power. She had only wanted to understand her grandmother, to honor her memory. But now she was standing in the center of something far larger, something ancient and fragile. Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "You can choose not to carry it. We could hide it again." Clara looked up at him. "Would that stop whoever's following us?" He said nothing. "No," she whispered. "It would only delay them. The truth would still be buried, and someone else would dig it up later." She stood, the silver pendant gleaming faintly in the dim light. "I won't use it for power," she said, "but I can't pretend it isn't part of me now. If it reveals truth, then I'll keep it honest." Elias's expression softened. That's what she said too. They spent the next day moving carefully through the city, visiting the archives again, tracing names connected to the veiled star everywhere they went. Clara felt the pendant pulse gently, like a compass leading her through unseen currents. At times it grew warm when she spoke with kindness, when she comforted a frightened child in the library, when she told a tired old man his lost photo had been found. It was as though the pendant was teaching her what kind of power it truly held, not in control or fear, but in connection. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the streets filled with amber light, Clara and Elias sat on a bench by the river. The pendant glowed softly between her hands. "Do you ever wish you didn't know any of this?" Elias asked quietly. Clara watched the rippling water. "Sometimes. But then I think about how it feels. That moment when the pendant shows me someone's truth. It's raw, but it's real. Maybe the world needs that more than protection." A long silence followed. The river glimmered gold beneath the fading sky. Then Elias said, "Be careful, Clara. The truth can hurt as much as it heals." She smiled faintly. "Then I'll learn both." As the last light faded, the pendant pulsed, once bright, pure, and steady. Clara felt its warmth move through her chest, deeper this time, reaching the parts of her she'd tried to keep untouched by fear. In that glow, she understood her grandmother's legacy. The pendant's true strength wasn't magic born of mystery. It was the light that grew when honesty met compassion. It was the courage to face one's own reflection without flinching. The wind rose, cool and gentle. Clara tucked the pendant beneath her sweater, letting its glow fade to a calm warmth. Somewhere in the distance, unseen, the shadow that followed her paused, watching, waiting, but for now, she felt no fear. For the first time, She wasn't running from the pendant's power. She was learning to carry it. And as night settled over the city, the silver light beneath her heart glowed quietly, a promise that the truth, whatever it revealed next, would be faced with open eyes. Confrontation and choice. Rain came quietly that night, tapping against Clara's window like soft fingers, asking to be let in. The city lights blurred behind it, rippling gold and gray. Clara stood at the glass, one hand resting against the cool pane, the other clutching the silver pendant that now felt heavier than ever. She hadn't taken it off in days. Each time she tried, it pulsed faintly, as if reminding her it was alive, or that she was not yet finished. Elias had gone to gather what little information he could about the man who had been following her. A collector, he said. A historian turned hunter. Someone who believed the pendant and the veiled star could rewrite what people remembered, reshape truth itself. Clara hadn't wanted to believe such power was possible, yet the pendant's warmth against her skin was proof enough that reality was not always what it seemed. A flicker of movement drew her gaze to the street below. A figure stood near the lamppost, coat dark, hat low. Even through the rain, Clara knew. Her breath caught. The watcher hadn't left. The pendant responded instantly, a sharp, cold pulse that ran through her ribs. Fear surged, but beneath it, something steadier rose, resolve. She turned from the window, grabbed her bag, and tucked the pendant beneath her sweater. If this was going to end, she would face it herself. The stairwell smelled faintly of wet stone and dust. Each step echoed. By the time she reached the street, the rain had softened to mist. The figure was still there. Clara Vale, the man said, his voice calm but cutting through the hush of rain. You have something that belongs to me. She stopped several paces away, the lamplight casting their shadows long across the cobblestones. It doesn't belong to anyone, she said quietly. It was my grandmother's. He tilted his head, and before that, it belonged to a society that swore to protect it. But protection requires understanding, and they failed. They hid it away, all that potential wasted. I only wish to use it as it was meant to be used. By twisting the truth, she asked. He smiled, thin and practiced. By freeing it, you of all people should understand. The pendant shows what lies beneath the surface. Imagine what could be revealed if its power were magnified. Every hidden sign, every forgotten story brought into light. No more lies. Clara's grip tightened around the pendant. The idea shimmered dangerously, the thought of a world without secrets. But her grandmother's journal echoed in her mind. It reacts to the heart, not the mind. Fear dims it. Deceit silences it. She took a breath. Truth without compassion isn't freedom, it's cruelty. The man's expression hardened. Idealism is a luxury. The world deserves to see itself clearly, even if it hurts. He stepped closer. The pendant flared suddenly, a flash of pale light against her skin. The rain seemed to pause mid-air, suspended for a heartbeat. Clara stumbled back, and the man raised a hand. From his palm, a faint ripple spread, not light, but shadow, bending the air itself. magic, but colder, sharper than hers. The pendant pulsed in warning. "Give it to me," he said. "You're already losing control. It's consuming you, Clara." She shook her head. "It's not consuming me. It's learning from me." He laughed once. "You think it cares who you are?" Clara took another step back, feeling the cold edge of fear, the wind pressing at her skirt. "No," she said softly, "but I care what it becomes." The pendant flared again, bright and trembling. Around them, light scattered droplets of rain, catching in silver bursts. The air shimmered with faint echoes, fragments of voices, half-seen memories flickering between them. Her grandmother's laughter, Elias's warning, the faint cry of a child lost in time. The man shielded his face, shouting something she couldn't hear. Clara felt warmth surge through her chest, but it wasn't anger. It was everything else: grief, love, longing, all the things she had held back since this began. The pendant responded to truth, and her heart was open now. "Stop fighting it," the man cried. "You'll burn yourself out." She could feel the pull, the weight of the pendant pressing into her skin, light seeping from the chain like threads of living silver. But within that intensity, she understood what her grandmother had meant. The pendant was not meant to destroy. It was meant to restore. She lowered her guard and let the emotion flow through her. The light shifted, no longer fierce but tender. It reached toward the man, wrapping him in a faint shimmer. His shadowy magic recoiled, then dissolved like mist under morning sun. He staggered, eyes wide. "What are you doing?" he whispered. "Showing you what you've forgotten," she said softly. The light deepened, revealing flashes, his younger self kneeling in an archive filled with old books, eyes bright with wonder. A girl beside him, smiling, his sister, perhaps. Then years later, loss, anger, obsession. The light flickered across his face, reflecting tears he didn't try to hide. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then, slowly, the pendant dimmed. The rain returned, gentle and real again. Clara stood, breathing hard, exhaustion washing through her limbs. The man sank to his knees. "I just wanted to understand," he murmured. Clara knelt too, keeping a cautious distance. "So did I, but some truths can't be forced out of the dark. They have to be invited." He looked up, eyes hollow. "What will you do with it now?" Before she could answer, footsteps echoed from behind Elias, drenched from the rain, worry etched into his face. "Clara." He hurried to her side, then froze at the sight of the man. "It's over," she said quietly. "He just needed to see." Elias looked from her to the pendant, then back. "You used it," she nodded. "I didn't mean to. It just listened." The man rose slowly, unsteady but calmer. "You've done what I couldn't," he said. "You've made it heal instead of reveal. Maybe your grandmother knew you would." He paused, rain sliding down his face. "Keep it safe, Miss Vale. The world isn't ready for such honesty." He turned, walking into the fog-streaked street until he vanished beyond the LAMPLIGHT. Clara stood silently, the pendant's glow now soft and steady against her chest. Elias exhaled. "You shouldn't have faced him alone." "I wasn't alone," she said, touching the pendant. "She was with me." They walked back through the quiet streets, rain whispering around them. When they reached her building, the dawn had already begun to pale the sky. Clara climbed the stairs slowly, feeling the weight of both exhaustion and peace. Inside, The air smelled of candle wax and paper. The journal still lay open on her desk, pages fluttering slightly from the breeze through the cracked window. She sat down and took up her pen. "The pendant's true power is reflection," she wrote. "It reveals not what others hide, but what we refuse to face within ourselves. It listens only to honesty and quiet courage. When met with compassion, it does not punish, it mends." Elias leaned against the doorframe, watching her. "You're writing it down," she smiled faintly. "Someone has to remember. Maybe that's the point, not to keep secrets, but to keep meaning." He nodded slowly. "What will you do with it now?" Clara looked down at the pendant, tracing its engraving with her thumb. The metal felt warm, content almost. "I'll keep it close," she said. "Not hidden, just quiet. It doesn't belong in a museum or a vault. It belongs where it can listen." Elias crossed the room and set a small box on the table, the one they'd taken from the estate. "Then this should stay with you too," he said. She opened it carefully. Inside lay the faintly glowing crystal, the veiled star. Its light pulsed in harmony with the pendant, softer now, like a heartbeat shared across time. Clara smiled. They missed each other. They sat in silence for a long while. Outside, the rain eased into drizzle, and a single beam of morning light slipped through the clouds, landing across her desk. The pendant gleamed gently in its glow. When Elias finally rose to leave, Clara walked him to the door. "Thank you," she smiled. "You don't owe me thanks. Just promise you'll rest." She laughed softly. "I'll try." After he left, the apartment felt both emptier and fuller, like the air itself had stories it wanted to keep. Clara moved to the window, watching the street below where dawn shimmered on wet stone. The lamppost still flickered, the same one under which her pursuer had stood. She unclasped the pendant and held it in her palm. For the first time, its warmth didn't surge or fade. It simply was, a steady, living presence. "Thank you," she whispered. The pendant glowed once in reply, faint as breath. Before settling back to Silver Dot, Clara placed it gently beside the journal and the veiled star, letting the three objects rest together, the past, the truth, and the heart that bound them. Then she blew out the candle, the soft smoke curling upward like memory. Outside, the rain had stopped entirely. The sky stretched wide and pale, washed clean. Somewhere beyond the clouds, light waited patiently, ready to return, and in the quiet warmth of her small room, Clara Vale smiled, no longer the frightened girl who had inherited a mystery, but the keeper of a truth that no longer needed hiding. Legacy of the Silver Pendant. The morning after the storm carried with it a hush, so gentle that even the wind seemed to tiptoe across the rooftops. Clara woke to the smell of rain-damp linen and the soft murmur of pigeons outside her window. Sunlight filtered through the gauze curtains in ribbons of gold, brushing over her desk, the worn wooden floor, and the silver pendant that lay there like a sleeping heartbeat for the first time in weeks. There was no weight in her chest, only stillness, as if the world had exhaled with her. She rose slowly, stood barefoot on the cool boards and touched the pendant. It was warm, but calm, no flicker, no pull, just a steady warmth that seemed to say, "It's enough." The veiled star beside it gave off the faintest glimmer, as if echoing that thought. Clara smiled. "You did well," she whispered. Then, after a pause, "We all did." She made tea and opened her grandmother's journal once more. The pages were softened by time, filled with looping handwriting and pressed leaves. Between two entries, she found a note she'd never noticed before. Message folded so precisely that it blended with the seam. "If you're reading this, it means you found what I could not say aloud. The pendant chooses its keeper, not by lineage, but by heart. It listens to those who understand gentleness as strength. Guard it, but do not cage it. The world will always need a little light that can listen." Clara traced the ink with her fingertip, the edges of her eyes warming. "I'll guard it," she murmured, "just as you did." That afternoon, she began to write not hurriedly as before, but thoughtfully, as though the words themselves deserved rest between each breath. Her own journal filled with descriptions of what she had seen, what she had felt, and what she had learned, that truth and kindness could coexist, that courage could be quiet, that magic was not about power but remembrance. Hours slipped by unnoticed. Outside, the city returned to its rhythm's bells. She paused occasionally to watch droplets slide down the window pane, catching the last of the daylight like tiny crystals. Elias visited before sunset, carrying 2 steaming cups of coffee and a small bundle of dried flowers. "You're writing the ending," he said, setting the mugs down carefully. "I don't think stories like this end," Clara replied. "They just change hands," he smiled. "Then what happens to the pendant?" She looked toward the desk where it rested, its chain coiled like silver thread. "It stays here, hidden in plain sight. I'll keep the journal close to it. When someone else needs to hear its voice, they'll find it." Elias studied her for a long moment. "You've changed, so have you," she said, and they both laughed softly, the sound mingling with the patter of evening drizzle. They talked until twilight, their words meandering from small things tea blends, upcoming art lectures, 2 larger questions neither could answer. When he finally left, the air in the apartment seemed to hold the echo of his calm presence, as though friendship itself had weight and fragrance. Clara tidied her desk, arranging the pendant and veiled star atop the folded journals. She tied them together with a thin ribbon and placed them inside her grandmother's carved wooden box. The box had once held sewing tools. Now it would hold a legacy. She stood by the window again. The sky was turning lavender, the city lights flickering to life one by one. She could see her own reflection in the glass holder somehow, but softer, too. There was peace in her face, the kind that came not from answers, but acceptance. The pendant glimmered faintly through the lid of the box, its light synchronizing with her heartbeat. Clara smiled. "Good night," she whispered, turning off the lamp. The next morning dawned clear and golden. The scent of fresh bread drifted from the bakery downstairs, and children's laughter floated up the street. Life had settled back into its rhythm, as it always did after wonder brushed through. Weeks passed. Clara resumed her studies, presented a paper on forgotten artisans of the past, and found herself smiling more easily, walking slower, noticing how light pooled in puddles or how leaves turned translucent when held to the sun. The world had not changed, but she had begun to see it differently, threads of meaning glinting between the ordinary moments. Sometimes, when she passed the wooden box on her shelf, she felt the faintest pulse of warmth. Not a call, not a warning, just presence. A quiet reminder that magic lingered where kindness was kept. One early spring evening, long after Clara had left for a short trip to visit Elias's library exhibit, a breeze slipped through her slightly open window. It stirred the papers on her desk and nudged the box's lid a fraction of an inch. Moonlight spilled across the room, silver and serene. A small figure appeared in the doorway, a neighbor's niece, perhaps 8 or 9, searching for the stray cat that often wandered into Clara's apartment. She stepped inside hesitantly, eyes wide at the rows of books and sketches. Then she saw the glint. Curious, she tiptoed closer. The pendant, half revealed beneath the cracked lid, caught the moonlight and shimmered softly. The girl reached out but didn't touch it. Instead, she leaned close, whispering as though to a sleeping friend, "Are you real?" For the briefest instant, the pendant's surface rippled, with light silver blooming into a pulse of soft blue, then fading again, content to rest. The girl gasped, smiling, then giggled quietly to herself. "I won't tell," she promised in a whisper, as if the pendant could understand secrets better than anyone. She backed away, closing the door gently behind her. The apartment settled once more into silence, but not emptiness. The silver light flickered once, like a wink, then dimmed, waiting. Somewhere in the quiet heart of that small home, the story continued, threads of memory and hope twined together, shining faintly against the tapestry of ordinary days. And in that glow, unseen yet certain, Clara's voice seemed to linger, soft as the breath of dawn. Magic doesn't fade when it's kept kindly. It simply waits for the next gentle hand to find it. Thank you for spending this quiet moment with me tonight. May your dreams be soft and your heart at peace. If you enjoyed this gentle story, remember to subscribe to Whispers of the Night, where each evening brings another calm whisper to carry you into rest. Good night and sweet dreams.